moved to Israel and I got drafted as a medic. So I served as a medic in the army.
From any particular background that was making you say like, this guy's a computer genius, you flunked your first computer science course, you were not into it, but then like you acquired really valuable skills. Clearly you spoke different languages, you pushed yourself to learn new things, you showed that you're a learner, you did something difficult as being a medic. So you put yourself in difficult situations of high stress and where literally people's life could be at risk. So that shows the kind of person that takes you. If you want to do things, I think of yourself, I admire it. So you're actually a risk taker in the sense that you want to live your life. That's amazing.
Having the comfortability of being uncomfortable, just like being okay with like, okay, I'm going to mess up and screw up a lot, but I'm going to try this anyway. And then I throw together weird words together and somehow I can get my point across. And if not, then you feel embarrassed and you're like, okay, whatever, I'll try this again.
It just shows me that it doesn't matter what time you start, as long as you're consistent, you can get there.
Oh yeah, so there are people.
How would you recommend building a CV or a resume?
As a whole, just Microsoft, it's great.
I'm with Bryan Leighton. He is a software engineer at Microsoft, a good friend of mine. We met at Tel Aviv, Israel. And I want to talk and share his experience going from studying a bachelor's in arts, in international relations and foreign affairs, and a minor in Middle Eastern studies, to having a completely different approach to technology and actually getting to where he is right now. Thanks, Bryan, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Excited to talk about this.
Bryan, what are your passions? Like you come from a very diverse, you come from a very diverse place. You studied at the University of Austin in Texas. You did a Bachelor of Arts. I noticed that you were studying and you had a thought of becoming a lawyer. You were an intern at a law firm. What happened there so that you thought, no, technology is where I want to be?
That's a very good question. I still think that I asked myself that today. Yeah, I graduated from high school and initially was planning actually to go to university for physics and engineering. Even though I had interned at a law firm, like I guess the idea, one area that I wanted to go into was patent law. So that was kind of like, okay, maybe I come from a background of lawyers within my family. And so I thought, if I were to kind of like continue that mantle, I really enjoy more of the sciences as well. So I thought maybe can combine both patent law. I don't know. I guess was like really one of the only intersections between law and engineering. And so even though I had this affinity for science and this affinity for engineering that I really wanted to pursue, I got, I guess, convinced or for whatever reason, decided to do a gap year, and which took me to Israel after I graduated high school. And I think like many of us who go to Israel, we fell in love with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and it kind of becomes engulfed in your life. And so I thought, you know what, this is something that is very, very interesting to me, and I kind of found a passion with that. And so I decided, this is something that I kind of felt a lot more personal attachment to. And so when I went back and studied, completely threw out the idea of ever studying physics or engineering at the moment, and then went into I began to study international relations and then focused in the Middle Eastern studies and international security as kind of where my focus is. So that's how I got there. I would say it was kind of on a whim until on a whim, since I went to Israel on a whim and wasn't expecting this big change.
At university, were you exposed to a lot of engineering, or I really don't know how university in the States work, but I imagine you have your own faculties and like you're not with the engineering students. Like
no. So we have to, like within the United States, at least university systems, is that it's a 4-year degree program. So the first 2 years are your core requirements. So these can be courses that are touching into humanities, into sciences, into maths. And so I had placed out of my math courses from high school, so I didn't need to take any, and we don't need to take more than like one math class, so I didn't need to do that. And same with sciences as well. So I took very little science courses. Actually, I think one of the courses I took was I took one physics course, which was like an intro to physics that I just needed to get out of the way and had like nothing to do with like engineering physics. And like actually a computer science course, which was like a CS 101 course that I did really bad. It's kind of funny now.
So that's a great start.
I guess it also, even though like I mentioned before, I had this affinity for studying in engineering. And as you can probably tell from the story, is that like many adolescent kids, I went back and forth on what I really wanted to do multiple times. And so towards the end of my degree in studying international relations, I actually began seriously considering on tacking on a physics degree. So I was planning to try to do a double major in physics and international relations. However, at this time, I was also set on moving to Israel. And so because of that, I would have essentially for immigrating to Israel, you would be drafted. And so given like my draft age, I decided not to do the major. Yeah,
Mm.
finished off with international relations. And so I told myself like I'll go do my service. If I finish and I still have a desire to go back, I can always go back to school and do another degree.
Huh.
So yeah, then I moved to Israel.
You moved to Israel, and what happened?
Yep.
Like, you did a coding
Uh,
bootcamp, but before you joined the coding
before,
bootcamp, what was the transition? Did your
yeah, so
personality change?
I
Did you notice like, hey, I need to eat? Like, it's a serious question. I need to pay my college. Like,
so
somebody
luckily
has
I
to put
didn't
bread.
I didn't need to take out school loans, so I wasn't didn't have that issue at that time. I moved to Israel and I got drafted as a medic, so I served as a medic in the army. I guess during that time, that's when you begin to realize like, what am I doing? I don't know what I want to do after this. Like this was a great 2.5 years of like pausing like actual big life decisions on what I need to pursue. And so this time, towards the end of my service, is when I heard about kind of the idea of doing a coding bootcamp. And so I was actually planning to do Elevation Academy, which, if you were looking into boot camps in Israel, that was one of the options. Um, and so after doing research on course report and such, I found that Wagon was the number one, but they didn't have it. They weren't opening in Tel Aviv at all until I got notified by a friend. So I was like, okay, this is the one that I've seen like had the highest like marks and reviews. So they're opening in Tel Aviv, might as well do it. And so that's how I kind of wound up doing Wagon. And I began in, I guess my batch was in June of 2018. So I began in April of 2018 and June 2018.
Huh. Just as a note, Wagon is not sponsoring anything. We both
No.
are alumni from that boot camp. Like we started there. But yeah, and I feel very strongly about it because I really like the culture there. I think it's great. Like it's really interesting. I think that people should notice that you didn't come from any particular background that was making you say like this guy's a computer genius. You flunked your first computer science course. You were not into it, but then like you acquired really valuable skills. Clearly you spoke different languages, you pushed yourself to learn new things, you showed that you're a learner. You did something difficult as being a medic, so you
Yeah.
put yourself in difficult situations of high stress, uh, and where literally people's life could be at risk. So that shows the kind of person that takes you. If you want to do things, I think of yourself, I admire it. So you are actually a risk taker in the sense that
Yeah.
you want to live your life. From the coding bootcamp, what happened next?
So finishing the coding bootcamp, what's really common within so Wagon, the one that Thomas and I did, um, it's very common where students will stay on, or alumni at this point, will stay on and work as teaching assistants, and either in that same city or especially in Europe, it's a little bit more common where you'll kind of travel around and do it. There's like a whole like little almost community of alumni that end up doing that. And so I became one of them. And so I ended up, I think I actually was a teaching assistant in the batch right after mine for very briefly, just a few days, and then moved to Berlin, Germany, where I started to work more, I guess, I worked as a TA for pretty much every batch for a good solid year, I would say. And that's how I kind of, I guess, worked on my skill set is, as I try to say, one of the best ways to learn is by teaching. And so by working as a teaching assistant and becoming more comfortable with what I was doing, at that point, getting a little bit more experience, I started to give some lectures and become an instructor. And also at the same time, from the community of Wagon, this is not sponsored, I promise. uh, from the community of Wagon, I stumbled into freelancing and began. So if you had already previously talked about the kind of the structure of the Wagon Bootcamp, the last 2 weeks, we built a project. And so one of my students at the time wanted to continue on with this project. And so I got kind of brought on as a freelancer to help continue his project after he finished the bootcamp. So that was one of my main projects. And then from the community, found other projects and just kind of stumbled into this freelancing gig, I guess you could say. Wasn't really intentional. It just kind of happened that way since I needed money. And yeah, from there, I was able to develop my skill sets and for about a year and a half, and then kind of found out about some apprenticeship programs. A lot of major companies end up running them, I think. So there's the ones I knew about. There's one by American Express that's actually based out of Brighton, England.
Wait.
And
What exactly were you looking for? Like you were what?
oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. What were
No,
you
I was
saying?
saying because you eventually find the lead program at Microsoft, but what
Yeah.
exactly is that kind of names? What are these? What is the name for these kind of programs?
Sorry. So apprenticeships,
Apprenticeships.
which a lot of apprenticeships are usually programs who are people who have non-traditional backgrounds. So I guess someone who studied international relations and not computer science and are looking for kind of some type of like mentoring, a bit like mentoring chances within a large company to help develop your skill set and make you a little bit more, I guess, desirable within the market. And so the one that Microsoft did specifically is that we would work on a specific team, and then if they liked us, they could essentially decide to kind of extend us an invitation to interview. And so
That is great. That is great. And
yeah,
I just want to show, and I love that part of your story because like there's a lot of alternatives. You went from studying something not related to being a medic to then finding coding bootcamp, becoming a teacher assistant, a freelancer, and then landing an apprenticeship. It's such a non-traditional course
yeah,
from what I'm doing
it's really
that I just want to show people that like you can get to where you want to go if you're trying to get there. And you don't need to be doing the same skill for 10 years. You can learn those skills like in 2 to 3 years, and by that time you have a really solid foundation.
And I think what's interesting with I guess I'll speak with about kind of what I've seen if I'm talking percentages of people who are from non-traditional backgrounds within Microsoft. Um, I feel like in the beginning, when computer science wasn't as defined of a subject, especially within university, you saw a lot more people who had studied, whether it wasn't really computer science per se as like a defined subject, they may have studied like networking, like something very, very specific within like the networking and networking protocols, but not necessarily about like working on web development, right? Or other people who worked on many other types of tangential subjects, but not necessarily computer science. Or people who just, love to code and write programs when they were younger and didn't study that in school. They studied marketing or something. And I feel like that was a lot more almost common since there wasn't really an established computer science degree. And that's just from my view of who I've talked to. And mainly this is like more of the senior and veteran employees at Microsoft, where it's more common to find someone who is like, yeah, I studied, I was a network admin, and that's how I found out about, eventually picked up on data structures and algorithms, since that wasn't really a part of my learning at all. That wasn't something that we learned, and I just picked it up as we went on after I had like gotten a position in like information systems or something like that. Or other people who studied marketing and were just like, I liked to write programs when I was younger. And, this was someone um, who also is like within a senior leadership position in Microsoft too. So and now like kind of in between this gap, you have people who are, who started to, as computer science got more defined, that's when I think degree requirements became a little bit more common, especially within the larger companies. And so at least for Microsoft Leaps, so the apprenticeship program I did is kind of this pivot in trying to see that there is some, almost like there is some lacking opportunities for including those people who have a little bit more creative of a or diverse backgrounds to bring this diversity into products that we're building, since we're not building a product specifically for engineers. So you're building products for people from all over the world, people who have no experience with technology or no experience in what the, knowing about data structures and algorithms, for example. And so you need these kind of like fresh minds to be able to come in and try to give this perspective on the products being built.
Huh. So from all the people, like now computer science pretty solid. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to university because I want the degree. That's how I view it. Because I
Yeah.
think that in the university, I get maybe the theoretical aspect of computer science, but there's no practical approach to that really applies in the studying.
Mhm.
How many of the people that, or how many of your colleagues have a computer science background, like a strict computer science background? How many are self-taught? How many do you think also did apprenticeships
Uh,
or internships from non-conventional backgrounds?
so I know I would say within my team specifically, I think most of I would say us, most of my team have a computer science degree now, and it's a lot more common. You'll see that, it's a lot less likely that you're going to have a Bill Gates or a, Mark Zuckerberg situation where they didn't end up doing a fully traditional degree and finishing it and having that as your qualification. Um, so I would say now it is more likely that you'll have people who have studied computer science. There are definitely us who either did a Microsoft apprenticeship program, who got in. So I'm not the only one within my area who had done Leap. And so it's really nice to see that it's been a part and that there are a lot of full-time employees who are from the same program I did. Um, I would say here it's more rare to find graduate hires who do not have a computer science degree. So graduate hires are typically those who are without any industry experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's I personally do not know of someone who was a graduate hire who did not study computer science in that regard.
Okay. So what I think it's very clear is you either get to one of these companies or you actually advance in your career by studying computer science and showing that you're good, or
Mhm.
doing a lot of work that proves that you're good.
Exactly. And so and I don't know, I also don't know that many people who, like, I haven't really talked to everyone about what you could say what pipeline they went through, or what are the qualifications to be considered a graduate hire, and if it needs to have like that CS degree requirements. But out of industry, I would say, so we have two paths that you can really take. It's graduate hires, which is when you'll have the recruiters on universities who are looking and bring them in, which I would say a huge portion of those hires are coming from people who have internships, who had interned before on a team. Since
Mm,
the team you're applying, they'll have a position open, they're going to reach out to interns since they know them already,
yeah.
um, and know how they work and everything in that regards. Versus an industry, which could be a little different. And its industry positions are typically a little bit higher, so they're not normally going to be a straight entry level position. And so there, I think it would be a little bit more common for someone who, let's say, started developing, got a job at a startup, or um, as as a, as a software developer at the age of like 18, for example, and then decided, that's what they did, were successful, and then later decided to apply into a position, into Microsoft that way, and not necessarily through a graduate hire.
Huh.
That's how, like, I personally don't know. I imagine there probably are some people who are graduate hires who maybe studied in the liberal arts degree and then applied into Microsoft and were able to get through, but I don't know anyone personally.
But I think that what really matters at the end of the day is like we can solidly say you need to have the skills.
Yeah,
Beyond the
yeah.
skills, like when did you get to leap? At what age? How old were you by then, if I might ask?
No, no, go ahead. What should I guess I was 27. How old am I now? I guess 20. I guess I was 26, I guess, at the time.
Because most people that are studying and are doing boot camps or all these kind of things are usually younger. So this just shows me that it doesn't matter what time you start, as long as you're consistent, you can get there.
Oh yeah, so there are people in my cohort who were, so part of a non-traditional background is there are some others who were out of the profession for 8 or 9 years for raising kids. So they were probably in their maybe late 30s, early 40s, who were going to this program, got full-time positions. We had a very big mix of people. I know there is a woman, colleague of mine in my cohort, or she was doing a postdoctorate on at the University of Washington in I think infectious disease is what she said. And yeah,
Mm,
she has like a full family and kids, and then decided,
wow.
you know what, I want to do something different, and then did a coding boot camp, and then applied into Leap, and yeah, she has a full-time job. So really, I had another friend who was a Starbucks barista and got into Leap and did it, and he was I think 18 or 19. So really, it was like a huge mix of and diverse kind of candidate pool who were doing Leap.
Hmm. I love this. Like one of my personal missions, I think that is I want to help and share this information for Latin America. This is in English, but I also think that the people that want it, I think that we should actually look beyond Latin America and push
Mhm.
ourselves. Like people that are only know Spanish should push themselves to learn English and actually try to have like the best skills, not because of coding or programming, but because it enriches your life. Like, what are your thoughts on learning languages? How has that helped you?
Uh, I love languages. Like I had to learn Hebrew, I guess. I don't think I really had a choice. Can you hear me? And I've always really had a love for learning languages. So I also studied German in high school. My partner now is German too, so I pretend like I can speak, but she
Ein bisschen
I think
Deutsch.
disagrees. I listen to it. I think she disagrees with me on how my abilities of speaking. Also, like I studied French in college, and I've always been very interested in learning languages, and always wish I could learn more.
Hmm.
And I think it's probably helped. I would say one of the biggest, if I were to say tangible skill set I've received from learning languages is having the comfortability of being uncomfortable. Just like being okay with like, okay, I'm gonna mess up and screw up a lot, but I'm gonna try this anyway. And then I throw together weird words together and somehow I can get my point across. And if not, then you feel embarrassed and you're like, okay, whatever, I'm trying this again.
if,
Um,
if
I
Stack
think like,
Overflow is a thing, Google Translate is
yeah,
also.
exactly. And I think
Yeah.
like for development, that really applies pretty heavily in that engineering or not engineering, I'll say programming and software development requires a lot of just like trial and error. And like you're like, okay, I'm gonna try this. I don't really know how this is gonna work. I'm just gonna keep trying until it works. And then I found a way. Maybe I'll show someone and it's gonna be really bad and they'll give me pointers on like how to fix this or make it better. It's even what I'm doing at the moment. Like I'm trying to figure out another technology and still I like I'm supposed to be presenting this to people who know more of it on me, and then you just have to show it to them and hopefully that they'll be able to give you even critique it and then you can improve from there.
Hmm. That is so cool. At the end of the day, how are you feeling? Do you feel you're at a good point? Do you feel happy about it? Do you feel there's a work-life balance, or do you feel like no, right now this is what I signed up for, and they're in the trenches fighting the good
Ah.
war? How is it to be inside of such a big company with so many responsibilities?
So I'll take it Amazon. Microsoft is not Amazon by any means, and it's like as engineers we kind of joke about this too. Um, Amazon is known to have a very rigorous and I would say very strenuous kind of work environment for the engineers. Microsoft, especially on the team I'm on, not the case at all. We're very much more into like we have a big emphasis on work-life balance. I think a lot of this comes from our CEO, so Satya Nadella. He's very mindful about trying to instill this work-life balance and a culture of an inclusiveness within Microsoft. And so like I would say in terms of like workload and especially during this year specifically, for example, we got 5 extra days off for this year that we don't really have to even record or say why we need to take them, things like that. So Microsoft has been very generous and helpful within this period specifically. I think like a lot of companies' true colors are showing when they may be a little bit more pressed on given the pandemic and how they're treating their employees. And I think Microsoft has done for me specifically a fantastic job on. And my manager, I've had excellent managers throughout if I needed to take a day off, I can take, we have sickness and pretty much mental health days. So I remember colleagues on my team who, especially during Seattle, got pretty crazy with the Chaz and Chop. And so they were helping a lot of protesters, and it's just a lot of workload that he would be up until early in the morning trying to help them, and then was like, I can't work today, so I'm taking today, tomorrow off. My manager's like, yeah, cool, just take as much time as you need. I think like a lot of that is instilled within my specific org or organization that we're in Microsoft, is take the time you need. If you need to take a week off, go do that. And just don't sacrifice your livelihood for work. It's kind of like
I think that's a
goal.
great way to put it. Like no work, no amount of work should actually endanger your health. I think that people should take care more of your health, and especially software engineers. We tend to not do it.
Yeah. And so they're all like, we're trying to force us to take our days off pretty much, just because people don't do it enough, especially during this past pandemic. That's what the mindset is. And benefits, I mean, as a whole, just Microsoft, it's great.
That's good.
I'm very happy with what, kind of what their offer, and it's definitely one of the, like, I'm very, very happy, and I didn't realize how positive the work-life balance and culture is at Microsoft, especially since I think a lot of people have the stigma that since it is a large corporation, you equate it to what you hear of stories from these large FAANG companies, and Microsoft, at least from my experience, is not like that at all.
That is great, because personally, I have done several internships. I have worked at startups, so corporate life is very different to me. I genuinely believe that you shouldn't compromise your values just because you want a job. You should seek a job that fits your criteria, because you want to work for somebody and build something that you think is actually working, or it's going to make a difference.
So yeah, like one thing that there's been some kind of talk, because of the benefits sometimes they're not seen. A lot of people will critique Microsoft's benefits, especially around what is offered in our workplace. So for example, we don't have, at Google, or I could speak of Facebook specifically, I think, since I had a friend who worked there, but some offices will have like breakfast, lunch, and dinner provided pretty much. A lot of people will say, like, complain even that, like, why don't we have this at Microsoft? Their competitor, why can I have free lunch? Why can I have, free dinner? And so a lot of Microsoft's, especially free dinner or free breakfast, is Microsoft kind of their notion, at least what they're saying, is like, we don't want you to be here.
That's great.
We don't want you to have to come in for breakfast and then also stay for dinner. Like, that's not, you need to go home and,
have a life.
Spend time with things that you like to do. Yeah. And we get like kind of extra benefits to pursue hobbies and things like that too. So it's also really nice.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, since joining Microsoft, what kind of hobbies are you able to do? Like, how has your software engineering life actually helped you pursue other careers or hobbies?
Careers, yeah. So I would say this is a very, very different. I'm in a very different organization with this regard, given that I would say as a hobby, I used to like to try to learn new technologies and things on the side outside of like my normal primary job. My primary job is, so I guess I can use this time to explain what I do. So I work in the organization called Commercial Software Engineering. We pretty much will pair up with the large, you could say, Fortune 500 companies that are Microsoft clients, and help them help them realize some of their ideas on how to build specific products and kind of integrate it with Azure, usually Azure or Microsoft products. And so with this comes that we work in engagements which are kind of span 3 months a piece. And so with this is that we're more on the side where we want to use what's comfortable for the clients. So using all the technology that they want to use. So for example, right now is that we have Azure DevOps that we primarily use. I'm a lot more familiar with that in like running continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. And so every 3 months, we're kind of picking up a new technology stack. So like for me, work is also where like the experience, like the idea of learning new technologies is kind of like satisfied for me. I don't necessarily feel like I have the urge to do this outside of work. Kind of another thing that I like to do, I guess in the pandemic, I usually like to play sports, but contact like meeting people isn't quite a possibility at the moment. So video games has been really big. I've been trying to learn game development, and by learn I mean I've done like one little or two video sessions so far, but I want to learn game development eventually and maybe build a RPG game. I guess that's kind of what I like to do.
You feel like you have a life. You don't need to go and work morning and day and night. And they actually want you to go out there and pursue what you want. And what you want is
Yeah.
exactly that. How would you recommend building a CV or a resume?
So I would say, and this is coming like at least when I've tried to help, even in like applying for Leap or applying for a position, one of I think some of the biggest things that will really benefit a resume or within software engineering specifically are having, those side projects or portfolio projects, having more practical experience in building something. I think for me really resonates with the employers from what I've heard. I haven't run interviews myself, so maybe in a couple of years I can get back to you about that and tell you like, okay, this is actually what we're looking for. Yeah, so I would say resume wise, definitely like if you have, try to put together portfolio sites, especially as a junior developer, some of the biggest things you can show are your curiosity for learning. Software engineering is not like other professions in this case where if you're comparing it to law, you have usually a set, you have a set law, a set constitution. Maybe it's amended, but it'll be changed how very often. Software development is constantly changing, and you have to constantly be learning new things all the time. So a lot of what employers will be looking for is demonstration that you are wanting and willing to learn and are not tied to one technology all the time per se. So they want to make sure that I think that's why algorithms and data structures are tested a lot and not necessarily a specific write a Ruby program, is because they want to see that your foundation is there, that you can kind of branch off and learn. You're not tied to one specific thing, that you're willing to kind of like branch out and learn new like other things, but have the foundation to kind of do it effectively.
Currently, I'm studying a lot of stacks and arrays
Yeah.
and doing
Yep.
a few algorithms.
Sadly, for interviews, it's still needed for the larger companies. So
Regarding, you said like hopefully you get to actually look into hiring people. What are your thoughts now that you're at Microsoft and you have thought maybe I want to do this? What are the paths and how should people look at if they are thinking I want to rise in the corporate ladder? How should they think about it if they're not even in Microsoft yet? And what kind of personality would fit in this kind of background?
that's a good question. I think so. I know, like, honestly, I would say in the beginning, you don't really need to have an answer to that. They may ask you, 5 years down the line, where you see yourself. And I think kind of the answer they're looking for is like, hopefully developing cool things, like that I'm working on something that I enjoy doing. And, I'm able to continue programming, I feel like is what they're looking for, like what I would be looking for, at least if I were doing this at that age. Like, I'm not expecting you to answer and say like, I plan to have started my third company and we will have like our second MVP out within the third month of that, like the start date of that company. Like no one's looking for that type of answer. um, but I feel like what they're looking for in the long run is that you just have like an appetite for curiosity. And even like we had a previous meeting where kind of our senior leadership spoke, and they were saying like, so maybe this is kind of some insight on like what are the minds of the senior leaders at Microsoft. But I'm just saying that some of the biggest things that they like, or like what this leader was appreciating, are being comfortable and being friends with failure. And since failure, as they say, is usually partnered with curiosity and learning. So if you see something cool, it makes you curious, you do it and you'll fail, right? Because inevitably you're going to fail. So, and when you fail, you usually have something that you've learned from that failure. And so he says like, this is something that they really appreciated very much. And I think if new engineers are coming in and having those three attributes that they become more comfortable with and try to work on, I think is one of the best things I can say. Hopefully they can present that and saying that's what they hope to be in 5 years, is curious, wanting to learn, and are okay with failure.
So no, there's no one single genius that runs it all. Everybody fails, and that's how you should approach it. That's what they want because they know that.
If you look at Microsoft's track record, right? It happens. Like, like Mixer didn't really make it out, but doesn't mean that, Microsoft has many products that end up failing in the end. And every company is like this, not just Microsoft. Amazon, I'm sure, has had many projects they've had to kind of make defunct. Apple as well. Every company is going to have products that are not going to succeed, especially within these larger corporations. And so you build from it, and I think that's what the main thing they're looking for. And hoping that, that's kind of the strive, is that even if a product doesn't work out or something doesn't work out, that you're able to hopefully learn something from it and then move on, and, either move on to another iteration or look to see, maybe you've learned some insight from that to build another product that will be even better.
Your story, what you're telling me, is like describing, like, I know it's not it, but in many ways, if you're a good software engineer, it means that you have to become an entrepreneur, because you gotta lead teams, you gotta work with people, you gotta actually brace failure and start continue learning. Do you agree? Do you not?
I would say what's interesting within Microsoft is that you have to kind of, like, in terms of going back to that climbing the corporate ladder, and Microsoft is, I don't know how this works with other companies, so I can only really speak to Microsoft on this, but you have two tracks you can really take, or two pathways. Is you can stay as an individual contributor, or you can become a people manager as well, which is going more into that leadership position. So even though, if you're an individual contributor, you'll be more expected to take on mentoring capabilities and being able to at least guide junior engineers. Um, so for example, like the senior lead, I am a junior engineer on my team. So I've been working more closely with the senior engineers, right? Even though they're individual contributors, they still need to have that interaction to show that, products are not, I would say, the more comfortable you are with collaboration and cooperation, the better you'll end up building things, because you're not just writing code for yourself, you're writing code for other people who are hopefully will come on and take it on after you as well.
But you're building it for somebody to use. It's not just code for engineers. It's code for a product. It's for a service.
Exactly. And you need to have that in mind. Like, you can't, that's why within the agile mindset, is that you're writing your user stories in the persona of customer, not in the persona of how the engineer is supposed to use it, right? So it's supposed, or how the engineer is supposed to build it, I should say. It's supposed to be in the point of view of the customer. How is the customer supposed to be utilizing the specific thing? How is the user supposed to be utilizing this given product? And so you need to have that. If you don't have it, then you can always develop it too, right? If you're not as comfortable with like being able to put yourself in, other people's shoes, then that's something that will probably have to be worked on. And one of the big, I would say, skills that people are looking for are collaboration and making sure that you can work well with other people.
Bryan, regarding the skill set that you acquired, I think that most things are acquired like naturally. Yeah. Like, people shouldn't really worry about it. Can you describe how you have learned to approach like building code, how you have approached building a product, and how should people think, like, when I'm trying to build a product for myself that I want to show others because I think that it has some value, how should they think about whatever they're creating?
I would say this is advice that I got, I really agree with. Number one, draw it out. Don't ever try to just go straight to writing something. Like, even if it's like writing something in words, like, the best way that I usually say is, like, the best way that you can really communicate it is to draw a diagram. Draw a diagram, draw it out. It will help you formulate the ideas in your mind on, like, what you expect to happen, as well as try to it makes it easier to present it to other people so you can hopefully get feedback on it. And so anytime I get stuck in I'll have to formulate a concept in my mind. I'll just take out a piece of paper and a pencil sometimes, and then just try to, like, draw boxes and figure out what I'm doing and, like, what components I need to build where.
When you say draw it out, do you mean like a class diagram, or are you talking like draw out the application as if it was Figma?
So more like class diagrams, you're familiar with, like, UML diagrams then in this case. So I would say usually at first I'll try to draw out like Figma style almost. So very, very, like, I'll just draw a circle and, like, say this is like the driver, and then, like, draw another circle and say this is like the receiver, and then, like, what components are fitting together in that case. I just feel like mainly to formulate the concept in my mind of, like, how things are going to work, especially as it becomes more, like, some components can be very complicated when you're working with it, and you can't just, like, go straight to, for me, like, I can't just go straight to drawing out, like, class diagrams and know exactly what functions are going to be needed or what methods are going to be needed on a given class.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So the first thing I do is like draw boxes on a sheet of paper and then try to figure it. Like from there, I'll look say, okay, I noticed that this can be created and insulated into a class. So then I'll do that. What are the methods? What are the actions, behaviors I'm expecting for this to happen?
And then you just iterate on the diagrams until you actually end up with your final piece, which
Yeah,
is
and always share it with people too. Like it's the best way. Is like I always try, like especially now if I'm working on something and the moment I am almost shaky about it, then I'll just ask for feedback, and it's just easier because it's going to be faster for them to notify if I missed something and I can add it in, or if I left out an edge case, they'll tell me things like that. So really, that's why like collaboration really is a big component with it, is that people are going to miss things. We are constantly reviewing each other's work. It's not just I'm creating a masterpiece. I mean, I don't think we ever think of it that way. It's always like, oh, I have this really crappy thing I just built, I want other people to like make it better kind of deal. I feel like that's how we all like internalize it almost, even though like they'll present something and it'll be really good, or I'll show something and I'll get good feedback, but I myself think that this is done really bad. So it's always good to try to get like that feedback loop as quick as possible. Like don't wait till the last second to do that. For those who are either getting into computer science or software engineering later than they thought they would be, or come from a non-traditional background, there are programs out there for people like us. Don't be afraid to look around. If you can find other programs, I know like Twitter has one, Facebook probably has a rotational program. There are like, it's becoming more common where they're looking for people with non-traditional background. And I still think that like computer science is a great subject to study too. Great foundations to have. And oh yeah, for interviews, definitely look at LeetCode. That's what I wanted to say if you haven't got to there. When I was prepping for my interviews for Microsoft, LeetCode.com, my bread and butter.
Did you pay for it?
That one I did. I paid for a month, I think, and
Okay.
then
Any books you would recommend? The cracking the code and anything else, or not even?
I think one thing that I didn't know with the interview process is that they usually will have a system design question. I think it's called grokking the system design interview, which is I didn't do it personally, but I've heard pretty good things about it. And yeah, just build projects that you have. It doesn't need to be almost like I guess a unicorn startup project. Just if you have things that you build, you're interested in learning how to more tangible experience. And I think the best way is just to like build products, even if it's like small things. Like the more you build, I think the more you'll be able to improve.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Awesome.
Anytime.